Welcome to the Passive Income Podcast. I am your host, Dividend Dave. Please be sure to join the Passive Income Posse by clicking that subscribe button below. Super excited for this episode's guests. Guest, you know him on Twitter at Options Legacy. This is Paul. Paul and Teddy are obviously killing it with the Investing on a 9 to 5 podcast. I'm going to just, Paul, let you give yourself an introduction.
Hey, good morning, Dave. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm really excited to be here. I've seen so many great guests come through these doors, virtual doors.
Yeah.
I'm pretty honored to be in that group now. So my name's Paul. I am a late 40s dad of two little kids at home, and um, I started investing a few years ago with a friend of mine. Got me interested in it. That's a whole story in itself, but as I learned about investing, I learned about different kinds of companies that you can to buy stocks in and stuff. I went the whole gamut of penny stocks and
We've all
options,
been
day
there.
trading, yeah, zero DTE. So I finally I do a little teeny tiny bit of some spec stuff on the side, but for the most part, finding the relaxing, low stress dividend investing has been wonderful for me. But so I currently live in Arkansas, Northwest Arkansas. We got the Razorbacks. They just beat Kansas last night. I've never been a huge like college sports fan until I moved here and started working for the university. So now all of a sudden, I'm a Razorback fan, brand
Yeah,
new.
die
So I'm
hard,
not.
no doubt.
Yeah. For 8 whole months. I am a diehard, lifelong St. Louis Cardinals fan. So baseball has always been my sport. But I'm getting used. I'm getting learning about the SEC and all these different technical things with college sports. So it's fun. My family did a little NCAA bracket. So I got the link in the text thread, and I said I'll do one. So I reverse engineered it with Arkansas as the winner, and came back all the way, to the beginning of the bracket. And now I happen to be the number two in the rankings for the family because of my picks. The other people who were ahead of me, they all picked like Arizona or some others. They're out. So it's funny to me that I have no knowledge and had no basis of selecting who I select except for I like that team. Okay, why not? So that's fun for me. I don't take it very seriously. I know a lot of people do. So if you do, cool. That's your thing. That's not mine. Like I said,
That's
I've got
fun.
two little kids at home. I've got one who's 11, one who just turned 8, and we moved out here for some open space. We came from California where it was pretty congested and expensive to live. So came out here. We have a lower income, or lower income for sure, lower cost of living, lots of family around. It's been really great for the kids to get out, and our backyard is open to the forest, so we have like herds of deer that will walk through our
Nice.
backyard. My daughter throws out some treats and corn for them, and they come through, and it's been really nice and relaxing. But this whole journey has also given me some time and bandwidth to meet Teddy, to get that podcast started with him, and get to know him real well. He's such a good guy. And my shout out to Teddy this weekend. He's going through some stuff. Um, he's going to be good, and it's nothing huge. It's going to affect him, but it's personal stuff going on. So I want to know he's in my thoughts right now. But that's kind of like the general overview of what I do. So I've got a lot of experience in my life.
Yeah.
Being old and bald and gray, I've been through a lot. So we can talk about pretty much anything you want to.
Yeah, I'm there with you with the old and gray. I'm not bald yet. I still have quite a head of hair on me,
Oh
actually.
man, you're lucky. I just
um, I'm a Blue Jays fan. Just to circle back to that baseball being in Canada, and I'm old enough to remember the glory days of the World Series championships back in the early '90s, and maybe
right.
someday we'll get there again. I am interested about your friend that got you into investing, and you said that's a whole story onto itself. Maybe give us the Cole's Notes version of that story.
I'll give it to you. So at the time, I worked for the state of California, and I was a supervisor. So this young man named Demario, he came and worked for me in kind of a temporary position, and he was just a really great guy, just a super nice guy. So we worked together for a while, and after he stopped working for me, we continued our friendship. And that's when he's like, "Hey, you ever looked at stock investing?" I'm like, "No, I've heard about it. That's not something, I'd seen Wall Street, I'd seen, Boiler Room, those kinds of shows, but no, I'd never really been involved in it." So over a few months, he would continue to talk about it. And we had a thing in the state of California. It's kind of like a 401k. It's a 457 account, and you have money deposited in there, and it goes into target dated funds or whatever kind of mix you want to choose. It's just like a 401k. Well, it had an option to go with Schwab as a self-directed account. You can move a large portion over it into a regular Schwab brokerage and manage it yourself with pretty much anything. So he told me about that. He said, I'll help you. If you want to learn about it, we'll give it a try. I said, okay, sounds interesting. So I moved over some money into the Schwab self-directed account, and he started, kind of giving me information, teaching me about market caps and stock prices and bid-ask spreads. I mean, all the basic stuff that now I take for granted. But I remember very distinctly the day I was driving home from work, and I was listening to something on the radio, some podcast or something, and they were going over market cap, and it was a concept I wasn't grasping. I'm like, I don't get it. I don't understand market cap, And they said something that clicked, and all of a sudden it just clicked in my brain exactly what it meant. So I called him. I'm like, dude, I get it now. And he was like laughing on the other end. He's like, yeah, it's pretty basic, So I feel kind of silly now, but that's how it was. He had absolutely no knowledge at all about the stock market.
Right.
So over a couple of years, I continued to study, I continued to grow, I continued to learn. So we got to the point where we were exchanging ideas. I would see stocks, I would hear about companies. Like I said, I've always been on that more of the riskier side. So I would find, I think I would find about these, these next big thing, the hot runner, the big one, and he would buy a little bit of it just to placate me. Oh yeah, I got some, and I would buy some, and some worked out, some didn't. The same thing happened with options. He kind of started talking about options, and I'm like, no clue. I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean? 100 contracts is 100 shares, and the same kind of progression happened. I studied, I listened, I learned, I did my own research, and I got to the point where I understood options, and I started trading options, and we'd be, like I said, we were weekend friends too. We would meet together with our kids, go to the parks, hang out. It was just, he became really my best friend. And then come just after Father's Day in 2020, he started going through some personal things that snowballed for him in his life, and he ended up taking his own life.
Oh,
it was So
I didn't realize this story was going to have such a sad ending.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I didn't prep you for it, but so it was a huge blow for me and my family, my kids, and that's what kind of spun me off into like, okay, this is what I'm doing is really gonna, whether I mean I'm not gonna take my own life or anything anytime soon, ever, but ends, what we do ends, with our families. So I really kind of started getting serious about making sure my family was ready and was set for if some tragedy were to happen to us. That's kind of when the dividends started becoming more important to me. The long-term security of those stocks became more important to me. Focusing less on let's get this next big runner that's going to run on us and make us rich kind of thing. So that kind of started shifting my focus around then, and that's also when we started thinking about leaving the state of California, coming someplace where it was a little bit slower of a lifestyle, where we could spend more time as a family, do more things where I'm not working and traveling and commuting so much. So, and it kind of like that was a catalyst for it, and a lot of goods come from that. That's kind of where I got my name from. I kind of use what I'm family or livelihood in reference to DeMario and what he's helped me establish in my life.
Wow, that's quite the story. Before we get into it any further, I am going to give a shout out to Buy Investing shirts. I know everybody's seen me wear the Dividends T-shirt, the Passive Income Posse merch that you can find over there, and of course, what we here in Canada call a toque. And I know we're the only ones that call it a toque, but I've called it that my whole life, and I've been wearing this one actually the last few days. It's still quite cold here, and that's a very warm. I'll call it a beanie for those who aren't familiar
I've heard
with
it
the term too.
Down here they call it a toboggan.
A toboggan, yeah,
I
I've
never
heard that one before too.
Yeah, watch cap, beanie cap. That's what I've heard it. It's 23 degrees here today, by the way, so it's chilly down here.
That's chilly for 23 degrees Fahrenheit. This morning when I checked, it said -8 Celsius feels like -17, and that was correct because the wind yesterday and today has just been it's been a cold wind whipping right through you. So.
Oh man, in Christmas time, we had this huge like snowstorm come through, and I'm like, okay, it's gonna be cold. It's gonna be in the 20s, but we had like a 13 wind chill. I walked outside, and oh man, that burned my skin.
Yeah.
Kids wanted to go play. I'm like, you can't go outside. It's not safe.
No, it's not fun. But yes, shout out to Buy Investing Shirts. Link in the description below. Use code word Posse for 5% off your purchase. And yeah, let's get into talking about you said you mentioned you got into sort of more the dividends and focusing on dividends and that passive income. Do you remember like the very first company or stock or shares that you bought that paid a dividend?
So I can go back to when I first started getting in the stock market with the Mario. One of the first companies I bought was well, so there are two. The first company I bought was ShotSpotter. It wasn't a dividend payer, but it was a good company. They build the equipment that cities can put up in their cities, and if a gunshot is fired, it uses sound and satellite stuff to triangulate where the shot came from and help direct the police to the area. So ShotSpotter and Axon were the first two companies that I bought. And Axon, I want to say like $13 or $15. And I'm going to look it up real quick right now because it sickens me. And when I think back to why I'm getting back into dividends, it's because of companies like this. So, um, Axon right now is trading at $210 a share. And I don't think they've had any splits. So I was at in the high teens and I had a couple hundred shares in the high teens.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
right. I remember watching it go up and like double and go up like 150%. And that's when I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to sell and take that money. So obviously that was a poor decision on my part. Those are not dividend payers though. ShotSpotter it's still trailing about that $36. I think I had it around 15. So but I had like Apple, in the 70s. I was telling someone the other day, I almost bought Microsoft. I remember looking at my Microsoft in my kitchen going, I need to buy some of that. It was like $89. And I'm like, I need to get some Microsoft, and just never, I actually put an order in, but the bid never, or the fill never, I never got the fill. Um, and then it started taking off after that. So I kind of got scared off from it. I've always been skittish about buying a stock after it's run up. It's an internal thing I can't get rid of. Like right now, I wouldn't buy Axon at $200, but it could go to $5. I got a thing about that. And I'm working on it. I'm in therapy, but but those companies I look back on now, going, man, if I had just been more disciplined and more serious about it, I would be holding Microsoft from $89. I'd be holding, Axon from $15, $13. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get these companies now. We look at them. I talked to Teddy about them. I hear different, feeds, different podcasts, different things. You hear about companies. I do my own little research. And if I decide to get in on it, then I buy it, and I don't watch it. I don't have my phone on with my, I have the phone on and I'm watching the general stock market to see what's going on. I like watching things like, oh, it's trading like this. And then Powell says something bearish. Boom, it does this whole whiplash thing. So it's interesting to me to watch that movement because I've noticed this is the pattern. But as far as trading on it, I'm not there anymore. I'm not sitting at my keyboard, trying to hit that button to buy, sell, because that's just too stressful.
Oh, yeah. And that's why dividends are great because you buy the company however many shares, whether it's a fractional share or 1 or 5 or
Yeah,
10 or 100, and you just kind
that's
of
been
sit back
huge.
and wait.
That's been huge. That's why I eventually went over to Fidelity. So in Schwab, when I left the state, I took my money out of the 457, and just for other reasons. But with Schwab, you can buy fractional shares, but only of companies that are in the S&P 500. They have their Schwab Slices program, but there's a limit to the companies that you can buy fractional shares of. Um, I noticed the other day that TD Ameritrade, I know they're merging, TD Ameritrade has a function now where you can buy dollar amounts of stock, but you're buying whole shares of stock. So if you buy $100 worth, it buys you up to $100 worth in whole shares.
Interesting.
On Yeah, on and that was on their that's on their web app, the Thinkorswim web app. I haven't tried it on any other application they have. On Fidelity, you can buy fractional shares of just about anything. I haven't found one yet that told me no. And you can go in and say, I want $100 of this stock. And if the stock is trading at 112, you'll get a fraction of one share based to $100. However it's traded. If it's a $10 stock, you'll get 10 full shares. If it's $10.05, you'll get your fractional shares based on $10.05.
Right.
So that's been really great with me because I've started the process where I've got my Roth with them and I've got a regular brokerage with them. So with the Roth, I was able to fully fund my Roth in 2022, leave the money in cash, and then like every week or two, okay, I'm going to buy this company, and I had set each week how much I was going to buy, so I would just buy that amount, and that's basically for me a full position in that company. Next week is a different company, and I drip it, so it just keeps rolling on the drip. But
Yeah.
it's been great to put $300 into play and not worry about making math and trying to figure out if I can get the bid ask on it. You just make and you could do limit orders too with that, but still, I just would just do a market order at $300 and forget about it and go about my business.
You mentioned Teddy a couple times. We should say that is the Dividend Dog on Twitter,
Oh
and
yeah,
you also mentioned how many great guests have been through these virtual doors, and he has been one of them. He was one of the very first early on ones. Like he was within the first 5 or 10 guests here on the Passive Income Podcast. So yeah, huge shout out to Teddy. I am going to bring up your link tree. Speaking of Teddy, because obviously you guys work together quite a bit
yeah,
with your investing on a 9 to 5 podcast. If you just want to kind of go through your link tree there. Obviously,
yeah.
your Twitter handle for the 9 to 5, and then
That's
go
the
ahead.
podcast Twitter. And on the Twitter, you can find Teddy and myself individually as far as follows if you're interested. The YouTube, Teddy pretty much handles, so in our division of labor, um, Teddy has the harder job of editing and posting our YouTube videos from our podcasts. Um, I do our podcast editing and posting. That link is there as well. It's available. We host through Podbean, but we're on, I think, every platform. I haven't heard anyone come back to me and tell me there's a platform they use that they haven't found the podcast on. I prefer Apple Podcasts. Um, there's a couple links we've had some conversations about alternate investing. So, Ground Floor is a company that you can invest in individual real estate deals. So, like if I'm going to buy a house and remodel it, I can go to Ground Floor, get a loan from Ground Floor to make that deal, and then Ground Floor kind of pools investors together with $10 minimums, and then you become a part of that loan. However, the loan performs is how well you do on your investment, and some of them have set interest rates like anywhere from 5, 3 to 11%. Start Engine is a company where you can invest in startups. It's companies that aren't public yet; they're brand new. They're up and coming as far as tech startups, food startups, clothing. The same with Republic. Republic is the same kind of platform. They're just two different. Start Engine is, and you've probably seen commercials out there with Mr. Wonderful. He's a promoter. I don't know if he's involved in the company, but I do know he's a promoter of the company. And Republic was one I heard about through. I don't know if you know who Jason Calacanis is. He's part of the All In podcast, a group of billionaires who David Sachs, Chamath Palihapitiya, David Freeberg. They have this podcast called the All In Podcast. And anyway, Republic is a company that supposedly they do a little bit more vetting of startups before they come in on their platform, and then you can invest in those startups there. The MPW dividend juice is a spreadsheet I created. We were talking about options and how you can use options to pump up dividend income. So that's an example of buying some shares of MPW and then rolling cash covered calls on it and taking those covered call premiums, adding it to what you're earning as a dividend, and increasing your overall annualized return using a pretty safe investing tool. So there's ways to use options in a very safe and conservative way. There's ways to do options in a very risky and reckless way. So that is a pretty safe and conservative way to do it. And then we'll put different spreadsheets up at different times for different kinds of ideas like that. So that's what that is.
Yeah, and I will definitely have the link to that link tree in the description below, so you can find Paul and Teddy and the Investing on a 9 to 5 podcast, whether you prefer it on podcast platforms or YouTube or wherever. And obviously, you can find them on Twitter as well. So that link will be in the description below. That one that you mentioned, the ground floor of the real estate, as you were describing it, I couldn't help because my community and my viewers know how much I love REITs, and I kind of felt like there was maybe a little bit of a comparison there between REITs and that ground floor real estate.
It's a little bit. So what happens with ground floor is you get you don't get paid on it. There's no dividends. It's only when the loan gets paid off or converted somehow or refinanced, and it's just like being a lender. You're the lender of it instead of really. So I've had a few that were sold. The house gets sold, the loan gets paid off. So my $10 investment came back to me at $10.50. So annualized, you're looking at 11%, depending on how much you invest. It could be more.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then the one that that is not on there that we're thinking of is Fundrise, and that's one where you're pretty much investing in REIT type of. It's like a private REIT. Fundrise. You invest in a portfolio of real estate, and then you get rent back or you get dividends based on the portfolio and how it's performing. And that is basically what it is. It's like a private REIT that's not publicly traded.
Yeah, some definitely interesting different ways to invest, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
just focusing on the S&P 500 or the New York, or for me the Toronto Stock Exchange, or
Right.
wherever
TSX.
you may be. I know I've had guests from across the pond who invest obviously in London and the FTSE and other exchanges overseas as well. So yeah, it's always neat to hear and see other investing avenues that may not be as, you know, in
It's
your
interesting.
face as the everyday, stock market news, right?
And it's stuff that people have been doing forever, but now, and I do like this term, the democratization of this business. It's someone sitting in an armchair in Northwest Arkansas can go in and invest in an industrial REIT in New York City or something.
Right.
I recently signed up with Masterworks, which is where you can buy fractional ownership of art or different types of creations like that. So you know, being able to look at these things and go, okay, you own part of that. Here, you have a certificate. You're an owner of this piece of art. Where people in the past you had to be billionaires going to different auctions and buying pieces of art and stuff. So it's
Yeah.
fun to be able to look at things, and whether it's a fractional share or a whole share, an owner is an owner. If you invested $10 in something and it returns 50%, you've got $15. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah.
how it is. Whether it's it doesn't matter if you've invested the whole share of Apple at $150. The fraction that you invested in is going to go up the same amount of money as someone who has a whole share or 100 shares.
And we talk about that a lot here on the Passive Income podcast too, is like how that small little bit, even just getting started, helps so much, right? Just, you know, and we talk about the tweets we see on Twitter in the DivTwit community of people posting their wins, right? And somebody saying, "Hey, I made a 50-cent dividend," and everybody's patting them on the back, like, "Hey,
Yeah.
that's great. 50 cents is way more than zero." Somebody posts $1 or $5, and it's the same reaction. "Hey, that's great." And then all the way up to the people that are posting, "Oh, I made 7 grand this month on
Hmm.
in just in dividends," and you're like, "Wow, that's amazing," because that's kind of where we're all aspiring to be someday down the road.
I love that about this community. Coming from, I've been in Twitter communities of diamond hands and hodlers and people who, like, if you say, oh, I trimmed some of mine, took some profits, and you get berated because you made some money. So coming from that type of environment to this dividend, this DivTwit community that I found has been really, really refreshing, because everyone is very helpful. If you say, hey, I'm looking at this company, what do you think? No one's going to call you a clown because you want to buy it. No one's going to berate you because you want to buy it. But they may say, oh, hey, look at their cash flow. Look at their debt. They may
Yeah.
give you some pointers, but they're not going to make you feel stupid because of it. They're going to give you some ideas to say, check this out before you buy. If you
Yes.
buy, good luck.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. It's all it seems the criticism is constructive criticism, and exactly what you just said. They're pointing out, hey, look at debt, look at cash flow, look at other metrics of whatever company that you m- may be looking at, right? So
Right. And for someone like you and me, and when we put ourselves out there with opinions on video and recorded video and audio, you put yourself out there a little bit more for criticism or for some people to come back at you and feel safe to troll you. But I haven't experienced it. I don't go back and look at our Twitter comments. Teddy tells us that are on YouTube comments. Teddy tells me we got great downloads. We had 1,000 downloads. People are watching it, which I think is awesome. But so if it's happening, I haven't seen it, but I have experienced people come back, oh, hey, idiot, MPW options, blah, 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 so it hasn't happened, which I'm knocking on wood that we can maintain our positive audience base, but it's been great. They are a good group of people out there willing to help and willing to help you educate yourself.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, being sort of more a little bit more in the public eye, ourselves putting ourselves out on video and audio, we are. That's why you not financial advice. Just keep saying not financial advice. We're here for if we give you ideas and you look into those ideas, and I find that's another thing we've talked about here on the podcast, on the Passive Income podcast, is the sharing of ideas of
Hmm.
just, hey, and hearing other people's journeys and paths, and okay, that worked for them. And hey, I'm going to look into that because if it worked for them, maybe it'll work for me. But at the
Right.
end of the day, do your own research, do your own due diligence.
A couple of principles I've always lived by is paying it forward. My personal life, my work life, and now in this environment of stocks, is if I learn something interesting or someone helped me, then I'm going to turn around and try to help somebody else.
Yeah,
You know, I maybe have heard something, being a relatively new investor, that someone with a lifetime investing didn't hear, and I could provide them some information that's new to them. At the same time, I'm not going. I'd rather listen to someone else, and I say this to my people who when I supervise people, learn from other people's mistakes. I'd rather learn from someone else's mistakes than learn from my own mistake. So I take those as information, as education as well. And I'm starting that now. I don't know if you've heard, but I recently started doing Amazon FBA selling on Amazon, and it's been the wonderful kind of environment there too. In that Twitter group and that Discord kind of community has been very much the same as Dividend community. They're very helpful. They're more competitive because you are actually competing against people, not
right.
directly so much head to head, but you're in the same space. So there's not a lot of competition in dividend investing. If everyone buys a stock, that actually
Everyone's
helps because the
paid.
stock goes up, right?
Yeah,
If everyone goes in and buys the same item to sell on Amazon, that does affect people. But at the same time, the people are willing to answer questions and help give advice. And like I said, there's plenty of people out there who are willing to let you learn from their mistakes so you don't make your own. And it's really refreshing to find that kind of environment and people who are willing to help when you're trying to make money, when you're trying to establish something that's going to hopefully provide your family with lifestyle income going forward.
right. I am interested in the sort of the breakdown of your portfolio, more so the dividend side of it. I'm guessing you still have some growth stocks in there, but in your dividend portfolio, is there any sector that you're heavy on that you might feel you're too heavy on?
No, I try to. I was for a while there. Earlier this year and the end of last year, I was pretty heavy in energy and oil because it was just running. I had Chevron and Exxon, Venom, and just a few other companies that all did really well. And as I in the last couple of months, as I've been focusing on doing the Amazon thing, I started kind of trimming back stuff and trying to bring things into a very more diversified and easy and something I can leave alone, and not have to follow. Like, oils, it's pretty stable, and the Exxon, Chevron, they're stable companies, but you still want to monitor them. You still want to keep on top of what's going on with the companies and make sure they're good. So I've limited my portfolio down now to just basically a few companies that I like long term. Like Apple, Microsoft. Um, I've got a few REITs, MPW, and shout out to Teddy. I'm still in Comcast. Um, but for the most part, I've got it sectored down to just a few of those single holdings and then some index fund ETFs that I can really just be hands off on,
Right,
because I found that the Amazon thing is really getting started is really taking a lot of time and bandwidth. It's not the time so much, but it's my mind is always thinking about things that I'm doing and
right,
preparing for the next stage. So to be sitting there, the only thing I do actively with my stocks now is, and it goes back to the options thing, is I've got an Apple calendar spread that I buy every week, and that one I kind of check in once or twice a day to see how Apple's doing, because this little tiny play has been unstoppable this entire year. I haven't had a losing week yet, knock on wood, and returning between 10 and 30% a week on this little play is something that I
wow,
enjoy, and it's something small on the side, that I do, but I really, like I said, narrowed it down to just a few stocks and the ETFs because I want to focus on Amazon right now.
Yeah, understandable. Um, so just two things. REITs, 99.9% of American guests I've had on have all owned Realty Income, ticker symbol O. Is that one in your portfolio?
Not anymore. It was one that I had pretty much most of last year as I was doing my wheel strategy with options. So I sold a cash secured put on it. It dropped in price. I ended up getting assigned the shares. So I was already into the shares at a lower cost basis because of the put I sold. And then I turned around and started selling covered calls on it. Um, and I like it because it's an O, it's the monthly payer. So in addition to the monthly payout of the REIT, I was getting premium from the option I was selling, which was pretty far out of the money. And I think I only ended up selling it because I was just trying to collect some capital to get ready for Amazon. It was one of those I sold late last year as I started getting ready to do Amazon thing. So it was something I held for quite a while.
Okay, and then you mentioned ETFs, and I'm not even sure if this falls under the category of ETF or index fund, but I do know everyone talks about it. It's one of the favorites on DivTwit, and I know that I've even had guests come on that are we've talked for an entire hour about uh, the SCHD. What are
Not
your
in
thoughts
SCH.
there?
I like it. SCHD is a good company. It's a good REIT to own or a good index fund. You're right. Getting the term right. Yeah. So it's an index fund. It's a dividend payer. It's really really good. I think for people who like where I'm transitioning to right now, just they want to buy something that's going to be pretty solid. It tracks the stock market for the most part, but returns a good return on the income. One that I just sold, I think a week ago, was Jeppy. So it's similar in structure as
Yep.
SCHD. In reading about how the actual fund is run, Jeppy has a little bit of a different financial tool that it uses to generate some income, which is this ELN that I'm starting to hear everyone is learning about. But I would continue to hold it. I did the same thing with Jeppy as I did with O. I bought it on a put. I continued to collect a dividend while I sold cash covered calls on it and collected the income and the covered call. And like I said, that was one of the ones that I just got rid of only because I'm just consolidating down for Amazon. But no, it's something I
Right.
held for a long time. SCHD I did have, and I see a lot of people doing their SCHD challenge right now. Teddy is doing it where they're buying some every week and trying to collect it. I think it's a good long term hold. Um, on these companies with these ETFs that are actively managed like that, the only thing that I would caution anyone to look at is their fees. Some can have some high fees, when it comes to it. So that's it.
Yeah, what I like, I don't own SCHD. I don't own any U.S. stocks as of right now, but it is pretty much on the very top of my watch list for U.S. American companies, simply because you look at the top 10, 15 holdings they have within that fund, and you're just like, wow, amazing company, amazing
Yeah,
company, amazing company, like all of them in the top. Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Home Depot. I'm sure those are in that top 10, and the list goes on. Like I said, right down through that top 15. I don't even know how many total they hold. I
I think
I, I
there's
do
a
have to
hundred
do.
in the total, and I
Yeah,
think every one of them is a solid company that you would not mind owning individually. So
right. And so that's just obviously a great way to kind of get a little piece of all of those amazing companies. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about sort of the high end of your portfolio and what you've sold off, and it sounds like you're still obviously with the tech stocks, Amazon or Apple and Microsoft. Um, is there any sector that you like shy away from that you don't want any part of?
and this is a personal thing, and I don't even know why. I don't have like a huge like moral feeling about it, but I don't own any, or I don't think I would buy any tobacco stocks. And there's a couple of REITs out there that do private prisons.
Right.
And that was my in California. That's what I did for 17 years. I worked for the Department of Corrections. That's my background. But for some reason, I can't bring myself to get involved in that stock. Which is, I'm not putting myself on any kind of pedestal because I own a company right now, a spec stock that they they provide monkeys for testing purposes, medical testing. So like I'm not putting myself out there as some kind of this isn't virtual signaling. Is that what they call it? Virtue signaling. That's
Right.
where you try to put out yourself as some kind of
saint or something that
Yeah,
you
I'm not
know,
at all. You know, I just for some reason, I just don't buy, the tobacco stocks over
the
those
sin
two.
stocks.
Yeah, and I don't really think because I like, what is it, Rick's? I haven't bought Rick's yet, but we talked about Rick's, and they own, like gentlemen's clubs and restaurants like that, and I would buy it. Yeah, I just haven't yet. I haven't
Right.
found the reason to put it in my portfolio, but I think it's a company to own. It's something to look into. Um, so things like sin stocks. I mean, you could say pulling oil out of the ground and using it to if you believe that destroy the environment is a sin, so but I can't even explain why. I just don't, But I would
Yeah.
buy like Constellation brands. I would buy, Samuel Adams if I thought it was good. I don't have a problem with buying a beer stock or a marijuana stock. In my wife's portfolio, um, I've got MSOS, which is a marijuana ETF. So I don't have any problem with those things. I just don't even know what it is. Like it's an internal block that I can't get over.
Yeah, I have a marijuana ETF as well, and it is by far the worst performing in my portfolio, which is kind of amazing. Like, marijuana became legal in Canada in 2017 or 18, and I it's yeah, I don't know.
Last summer in the states, they were talking about a bill was going through the Senate that was supposedly going to decriminalize it, and that started getting a lot of traction around September. And then I'm not sure what happened, but it kind of died, and then all the marijuana stocks kind of tanked with it right about then. I think hers is among the in her portfolio. It's among the bottom producing in the portfolio, but it's just one of those things that it's when the time comes, the news comes, it's going to come back. It's just something that's going to happen.
Right.
And the only reason I haven't dropped it is because it's so far down. I don't want to take the loss on it and
Yeah,
figure I'll
I'm
just sit
kind of
on
in
it.
the same boat. As actually mine pays a dividend every quarter. It's a small dividend, but I'm like, I'll just hang on to it and keep collecting the dividend. It'll only take 500 years of dividend payments to make back my loss, but
You do the math and you see how long can I
yeah.
hold
Well,
this
I haven't
before I
done the
break
math,
even.
but I'm guessing it would be about 500 years.
That's
Uh,
funny.
Other sectors, because obviously there's so many sectors.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Walmart and Costco simply because I'm heading to Walmart later today to do some grocery shopping. So anything in that like consumer
Yeah.
staples and consumer discretionary that
I have a
catches your
lot
eye.
in my wife's portfolio that's heavy on retail. Just because I try to buy stuff that she understands and she knows I manage it, and she'll ask it once in a while. Oh yeah, what's that company? Um, I think Costco it's expensive as far as when you look at market cap and things like that, but it's one of those companies that's just going to keep going.
Right.
And I'm waiting for them because I know they also do um, periodic special dividends, which is good. And I think when they do come out pretty soon, I think they're going to announce a price increase on their membership. I think that's going to be a catalyst too to put it to another level of price. So you'll get some gains on that. But it's just one of those things that's going to keep going and
Yeah.
just keep chugging along. Walmart, we're right here in Walmart country. I'm 5 minutes from the home office where I live, and it's everywhere. And the more I see it, and the more I see what they're doing technology wise, the better I feel about the company. They're gonna be like me. I always say McDonald's has turned from a fast food company to more of a REIT, right? Because they own real estate, they lease the real estate to their franchisees, and most of their income, majority of their income, I think, comes from real estate more
Right.
so than the franchisees. I think Walmart is on the edge of technology. They're doing a lot. At the main store that's down the street from where I live, they have a huge. It looks like a what you'd see at the airport as far as like a tower. You know what I mean, like a air control tower, and they have a drone landing pad there. So they're testing their drone deliveries out of the store, and I've seen it take off. This drone takes off, and what I understand right now, what they do is line of sight deliveries. In the area of Bentonville where it is, it's pretty flat. So there's a good line of sight for several miles doing deliveries. Doing ways to make things better, more efficient. Amazon's doing the same thing. I think Amazon got caught just with a huge valuation and just being so expensive for what the company was doing. But they're a solid company too. They're one that's going to be around for a long, long time. No dividend payer yet. I can see Amazon and Google kind of flipping that script in the future, becoming some value dividend plays as opposed to the growth plays they have been. When that happens, I'll look seriously at them. I held Google for a while, just on the option side, doing like I was describing earlier, the wheel strategy for calls and puts. But I think if they do come around to become actual dividend payers, they would be companies I would for sure look at adding to a long term portfolio.
Interesting side note, just this morning I watched a Mark Rober video about drone delivery and drone technology. So it's coming. It's a lot closer than we think.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mark Rober. I doubt Mark Rober's watching. For any of those who know, he's got like well over 20 million subscribers on YouTube. Um, Going way back to about 20 minutes ago or more, you mentioned TD Ameritrade, which obviously made me think of the Canadian banks and the banking sector. And obviously, there's been a lot going on in the banks in the US in this last 2 weeks. TD is obviously Toronto Dominion, one of the big five Canadian banks. They have a huge presence in the US with TD Ameritrade and just their standalone branches as well. Yeah, let's just dive into banking and financial sector.
It's been a tough one for people. I was a holder of a regional bank out here, the Bank of the Ozarks, ticker symbol OZK. I bought it, and then so we have a mutual friend, Dave Greta, and I read Dave's book, and it was Dave's book that made me kind of look at Bank OZK in the first place because he talks
Shout out
about
to
there you
Dave
go,
Greta right there, night
there's
trading.
Dave night trading. It's on my desk at work. Um, so he talks about buying your bank, and he has a great story about the bank he bought, his local regional bank, and how well it did. Out here, there's a couple of prominent regional banks. Arvest Bank is one, but it's privately owned. It's actually owned by Walmart, or it was started by Walmart or some Walmart people, and that's one bank. And Bank OZK is one I've heard about for years. I remember when I lived in California and OZK was doing really well. It was one of those that you would hear like on the Zach's Value podcast, and they talk about it all the time. Then end up tanking because there was some kind of news about how it was doing mortgages, and it really took a dive. But then it seems to bounce back from them. So it's always been something in the back of my mind, and I started seeing it out here; it's everywhere. So I thought, okay, I'll buy the bank. I went ahead and I bought it. I was talking to Dave, and I mentioned it, and he had said something about, well, be careful with that bank. Take a look at its book. You know what I mean? You price the book, and he mentions that in his book. So I did. I went and looked at the metrics of that bank, and I thought, okay, it's pretty overpriced for the book sale for the book value. I ended up being slightly green on it, I think, and I sold it just because I was like getting nervous. I was like feeling weird about it. And this was months ago. This wasn't anything to do with SVB or anything going on right now. But now I look at it and it's down. I had it like in the 40s and it's at $35 right now. So I think listening to Dave's, like I said, he would just give me friendly advice. He was just
Yeah.
saying like, hey, check that out. I took his advice. I checked it out and I made a decision to drop it. And it turned out that right now it was a good decision. It might be a good buy right now. I'd have to go back and see if it's within that range for price to book, but it's definitely something that I'm glad I got out of when I did, because I think there's just going to be lots of uncertainty going forward until the FDIC comes out and makes a law or changes the rule. Because right now people are feeling, okay, up to 250 you're safe. In the United States, the FDIC will insure your private deposits up to $250,000. I think that rule has been around since the 30s, since the Great Depression. Um, so now the conversation is: do private depositors need to be secured more, up to more money, because value, people have more money. Obviously, $250,000 stays the same as it was even 20 years ago. So I think until all that kind of gets settled and sussed out, there's going to be a lot of volatility in these local regional banks. I've never liked Bank of America. That's another one of those. I hate the bank. I've banked with them before. They've done shady stuff with me, and I don't like them as a company. I really don't like Bank of America. Wells Fargo, I think, treated customers poorly out here. They had a lot of lawsuits. I was never personally involved in any of that kind of stuff, but I don't like the way they treat their customers. So banks in general, I think, have they almost have like the same kind of hill to get over as oil companies, because the way they treat people, they fees and things that rack up fees and to snowball, and the people who can least afford those kinds of things are the people who get affected the most by them.
Right.
So I'm not big on the banking sector. I haven't never really been big on it even before all the stuff that's been going on right now around the regional banks. But going forward, there are a few small regional banks that I would look into um, once things kind of get settled. Once the United States government comes out and says, okay, here's the new limit on FDIC insurance is going to be 1.2 million or whatever it is. Then I think things will start settling down because people will feel their money is more safe and secure. But there definitely does need to be the regulation. I'm not someone who's totally the government needs to control everything, but left to their own devices, private companies have proven they can't be trusted to do the right thing every time. One of the most interesting like documentary movie type things that I watched was The Smartest Men in the Room, and that really goes in deep dive into Enron and how Enron was allowed to continue its charade and eventually blow up the way it did. And I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that that's happening right now with somebody. There's some company out there that's doing this shell game and just waiting for it to explode. I watched the Bernie Madoff little mini series on Netflix, and that was interesting. But that was the SEC dropping the ball. They were told several times that this guy's there's no way he could be doing what he's doing, and they ignored him because he was Bernie Madoff. He had the name, the clout.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that makes people nervous. That makes people like me nervous because I'm not in that loop. I'm not in the game. There's people out there who will go, I would never invest in that company because I know Joe Smith, the CFO, is a crook and he's been a crook all his life. We don't have the benefit of that kind of insight for these
Right.
companies that we buy. So we do have to rely on a lot of faith that these companies are just doing what they're telling us they're doing. When they put the black ink on the paper that says this is our income, this is our cash flow, this is how much our liabilities are, and this is our net profit. We have to take that basically on faith that they're telling us the truth. Because yeah, there's rules, there's regulations, there's laws, but I think the companies have proven that they don't necessarily always follow the rules. So there's that little grain of salt that you have to take that with and look at your own portfolio and make sure that the companies that you're investing in are diversified. Put all your eggs in one basket with one company. It would shock me, but Apple could come out with some huge, controversy or some huge scandal that they're doing something with their money. Who knows?
Yeah,
It
you
could
never
happen.
know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen on Twitter the big six Canadian banks and the longevity and consistency of their dividend payments. And like you had mentioned, the TD Ameritrade. Um, any thoughts on the Canadian banks, or just haven't looked into it enough to
I
know?
don't have any real knowledge about. I know that as far as Canada goes, I know the TSX is your exchange, um, and uh, and I've seen other people. So there's a couple other Canadians I follow on Twitter, and I think the Canadian banks pay pretty juicy dividends, from what I can tell. But they're pretty well regulated. There's another Discord group I'm in. There's an Australian, and he's watching this stuff going on here, and he's comparing it to what happened. I guess the same thing kind of happened in Australia. There's like a big four banks. There's a big six banks,
Right.
and they're and some of the Canadian people I listen to, some of the Australian people I listen to, are saying that's kind of they think where we're headed, which I think would be I don't know how it's worked out for you guys, but I think in America, they're very independent minded. They like their regional stuff. They like having their local things. So I don't know if having, just like a Big Ten of banks or Big Four or whatever it is, running all the banking would be something that America wants. I think they like being able to go. Like I like going to my local bank that's homegrown and
Yeah.
people there who there's people at this branch that were there when the bank started. So it's pretty interesting that they have that kind of longevity. Whereas you go to some place like Wells Fargo, and they've completely lost their footing from where they were, stagecoach company protecting the gold miners, to now doing millions and dollars of false mortgages, whatever they were
Yeah.
doing. So, how do you think it would work out in the United States? Or how familiar are you with the states and their culture?
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand you have sort of that similar, like you mentioned, those big five banks, the JP Morgan, the Bank of America, your Wells Fargo, uh, a couple other big ones, and then all those regional ones. And for the comparison, Canada, we basically have what we call the big five, and then National Bank is quite big as well. So it sometimes gets included as the big six. And then regional banks are like few and far between. So the big thing that I always love pointing out is the longevity and consistency of the dividend payment. Uh, the first bank, I believe Bank of Nova Scotia in 2029 is coming up on 200-year anniversary of dividend payments.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I think 1833, the next one is at 200 years, and all of the big five are over 150 years of dividend payments. So, obviously there hasn't been dividend growth every single one of those 150 to 200 years, but just the fact that they've paid them for nearly 200 years is, like I said, longevity and consistency. And if you're learning from history, you're going to be like, well, odds are good they're going to keep paying those dividends, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, obviously, just based on the age of the United States, that blows everything away. People get excited to hear about their dividend kings and stuff like that with their 50 years of consistent dividend payment. That blows my mind.
well, and keep in
Several.
mind, Canada's only been a country since 1867, so not even 200 years, and these banks have been paying dividends longer than Canada has been a country. So,
That's amazing. That's awesome. Yeah, I'd like to see. I would like to just see more, being able to put more trust in our financial system. I don't know if it's going to happen, um, because you just, as soon as you think that they've gone through one kind of like a cleaning house, clearing out some chafe, something else pops up, and it's really hard to feel like, okay, we can trust the government now to monitor these banks and keep our deposits safe. Can we? you know, it's still better than our mattress, especially with inflation, but it's tough because you're putting your whole life savings
right.
into these institutions, expecting them to take care of it, to safeguard it for you. And when you find out that they're going out and they're either spending it on things that are risky, or they're making risky investments, or doing risky mortgages, or whatever they're doing, then what do? You're stuck. You can't go anywhere else. You can't do anything else with your money. It's tough. It's just tough to be in that situation. So
People, you can help support the Passive Income Podcast by buying me a coffee by using the QR code on the screen or the link in the description below. One other sector I want to touch on before I see we're already well over 50 minutes. We're probably going to go over an hour, so hopefully we don't get too long-winded here. But this has been a great conversation. I do want to touch on telecoms as well. Obviously, this is one where there's a little bit more of a similarity in Canada and the U.S. We have sort of our big three here being Bell, Telus, and Rogers, and then similar in the U.S., the big three being AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, and then we have some regional players, and I know you guys have some regional players. Big news this past week. Shout out to another Canadian, Ryan Reynolds, just
yeah,
made a mint with Mint and selling that one to who did he sell it to? T-Mobile.
T-Mobile.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Ryan Reynolds. Not personal friends, but
No, he's
um,
good. He's a good actor.
he was on a David Letterman's got his little show on Netflix, where he interviews people,
Yeah.
and he went to Ron Reynolds' house and interviewed him there, and he just seems like, and I know Canadians, there's that, oh, you're all nice, yeah, hey,
We try to be.
but he definitely kind of embodies that, at least on TV. I really, he's one of those people that you probably don't ever want to meet in person, in case he's kind of a jerk, but because you hope he's that same person, in real life. But he seems like such a great guy. I watched the soccer documentary too, on the soccer team they bought.
Yeah, Wrexham Football Club.
Wrexham, yeah, and that's really interesting. And I find myself rooting for them, and just being like, yeah, I want to do well. So hearing about the T-Mobile thing with Mint Mobile is really cool. I think he's going to be somebody that we're hear a lot of in the future. He's going to bridge that gap from entertainment over to business, and he's going to be. I mean, he's already on like MSNBC down here, when they do their like stock picks, and he's someone that comes on pretty regularly and talks business with them. So good on Canada for sharing Ryan Reynolds with us, because he's amazing. As far as the telecoms go, I love AT&T. It's been kind of a stepchild of telecom forever, because when I first started, it was AT&T was one of the first ones too, back there in the days of Axon and ShotSpotter. AT&T was something I'd bought. And then they started making some mergers and stuff, and their debt just went through the roof, when they're paying this dividend that didn't seem sustainable.
Well,
So
it
that's when
wasn't. They had to cut their
yeah,
dividend,
they
right?
cut it. So I ended up getting out of them. But one thing that kind of brought me back, and I'll have to give a shout out to Teddy, is his mindset is the company may cut a dividend, but are they doing it for a reason? Example, they may doing it for the reasons, then that's a way, that's not necessarily the red flag that some people use that action as. if a company is cutting its dividend because they were way overextended, they could never afford it in the first place, and they were bringing on debt just to pay the dividend, that's one thing. But if a company is going, okay, we're going to really tackle our debt, we're going to really look at the future growth, and we're going to see how we're allocating our money. So in order to do that, we need to pull back a little bit and consolidate our money. Then that's to me, that's a good business decision, right? That's
Yeah.
somebody that's looking at the overall well-being of the company, the shareholders, and trying to make a decision to benefit everybody down the road. So AT&T, I think, did that when they brought back their dividend. They started doing some spin-outs of the companies that weren't performing. They were getting rid of those companies, and I think AT&T is just going to be something you can hold for a long, long time. And whether it's something you continuously hold or whether maybe you drop it, you buy it back, it's one of those. It's going to be like Apple, Microsoft. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be something that's making money. And I like AT&T. I do own AT&T in my portfolio. Now that you mention it, um, I hope telecoms out here, because there's such a mix, right? We have, like you said, T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon. But then we have because of the way streaming is set up, I for some reason my brain I put like Comcast and Disney kind of in that same boat because it's
Yeah.
all using bandwidth, it's all entertainment, it's all streaming. So my big three that I own are Disney, Comcast, and AT&T. Comcast and Disney, I think, are pretty correlated. They're connected through Hulu. They both have that stake in Hulu that I'm interested to see what happens. I would like to see Disney either sell Hulu to Comcast and drop it and start licensing its stuff to Hulu for money. But what am I going to do? I'm not in the corporate world of Disney. But I think Disney will use some of that income and hopefully reinstate their dividend. Comcast is one that I bought after listening to Teddy and doing my own DD, obviously, but after listening to Teddy and his thoughts on it, I think it's a good company going forward long term. There with AT&T. So those are the ones that I don't, and I use AT&T. That's
Yeah.
why I own what I know. Verizon has always been around. I've never really owned it. I've traded it, but I've never had that like I'm going to buy Verizon. I just don't have that same internal feeling of
Right.
Verizon as I do with AT&T. And T-Mobile, I think, is a great company. I think T-Mobile is one that's going to be up and coming. It's still relatively new as far as like the age of telecom out here. But I think it's come up through like Sprint and all these past companies through mergers and changes. So we'll see what happens with T-Mobile, especially now with the Mint stake and the users they're getting from Mint. I'm actually looking at switching from AT&T to Mint Mobile because it is a lot cheaper, and I think the only thing I got to do is pay off one of our phones through AT&T. Then I'm going to make the switch myself because I think the service is good from what I've heard, and so do some research in that. But that's one thing that's on my plate on my personal side.
Similar here with what started out as telecoms. Bell Canada started out around the same time as AT&T, well over 100 years ago, and now are into there's a Bell Media division where they own the sports network and other media entities. And Rogers, one of those big three telecoms, it has been involved with a merger with Shaw Communications, which is like a cable company as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very similar story there. I do want to give one final shout out to Ryan Reynolds because about a year ago, the owner of the Ottawa Senators NHL hockey team, he passed away, and his two daughters inherited the team, and so now the team is up for sale. Ryan Reynolds is involved with one of the groups in an ownership bid. So there's several different groups bidding to buy the team, and he's involved with one of those teams. So similar to the Wrexham story, that he could end up being a partial owner of a National Hockey League team.
Awesome. I read that. I remember reading National Hockey League somewhere, but I couldn't remember which team he was being associated with. So that's cool. If he gets in Major League Baseball, then that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on this morning.
Oh man, thank you for having me.
Another hour, another guest, another hour just flies by. I have so much fun talking to everybody, and just it's so easy to talk to everyone. We're all so passionate about this. Any final thoughts before we sign off? Any advice you would give maybe a new investor, or anything you want to say before we sign off?
What I tell people who are interested and they want to learn about this stuff is read everything you can read. and listen to podcasts and get all the information out there. Some of it's going to be right, some of it's going to be wrong. If you listen closely enough, you'll start being able to pick out information that's good and valuable to you. The number one thing you have to decide is what your risk is, what your goals are, and the best way to get there in line with those factors. Some people can come in really risky and not have a bunch of worry about losing the money. Some people are very, very conservative. Reach out into the Twitter world. Dividend Dave, Teddy, the Dividend Dog, all those guys out there. There's so many. I don't want to start naming names because I'll leave someone out, but they are willing to give you their advice, to give you their thoughts, and to give you an idea of, oh, go look at this company, and see what you think. Dave Greta's book is a great place to start too. So, check it out, learn about it, talk to people. They're willing to give you advice and they're willing to answer your questions.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. And like I said, it's been another amazing hour, another amazing guest. Thank you so much for coming on and spending some time with me here on the Passive Income Podcast. If you are still watching or listening at this point, we're over an hour, so that means you know the rules. Subscribe. I just hit end recording. We're good.
All right. Thanks, Dave. That was fun.